In 1977, Donner received a phone call that would secure his future as a first-class director. The film in question was Superman.
And one day I was at home and my phone rang, and a man was on the other end with an accent, and he said, "My name is Alexander Salkind. You know who I am?" I said, "No." He said, "You don't know who I am?" I said, "No." He said, "I produced many films, and one of them was Three Musketeers." He said, "Do you know Superman?" I said, "Of course I know Superman." He said, "Well, we're producing it, and my director is no longer going to be on the picture, and we'd like you to do it. And I'm sending you the script." And he said, "I'm going to pay you a lot of money." I said, "Oh, really?" He said, "Yes, we're doing 2 pictures. I'm going to pay you $1 million." What? $1 million? I mean, that was a license plate. I mean, that was like somebody using the expression "all the tea in China" when you were a kid. So they told me everything was prepared and all ready to go, and they showed me their preparation of flight. They had this film they ran, and it was like the actor, the stuntman they tried with, he would run and jump in one cut. The next cut, he was literally on a board, which was under his costume, and they had him on wires going across, and then they would cut and drop him down the scene. I said, "Hey, fellas, this is I forget what, the 80s, and the beginning of the 80s, and this is Superman, and if he's going to fly, this picture's not going to work unless he really flies."
Flying could not be a spur-of-the-moment idea, like, I think I'll get up and fly away now. It took a lot of people to make it happen. And I'm very indebted to all of them. And again, what Dick Donner was able to do was to make every one of the people on the flying team feel that they were an important part of the job. So we had guys who ran the wires, and we had guys who did mechanical arms, we had guys with special lenses, all of which had to work together. There were a lot of different ways we did the flying. Sometimes it was literally on the end of a crane out in the middle of 57th Street. Sometimes it was on the side of a studio wall in a fiberglass mold. Sometimes it was hanging on wires in front of a blue screen for days at a time, looking at playback of a scene on a TV monitor. We would get sometimes about 2 shots a day. I mean, and Donner was very, very critical. He kept the standard of the movie up very high, because he would come in sometimes and he would see a shot and say, "No, that's not going to be good enough. I have to go back and do it again." So he was tough on everybody, and yet he was fun. It was a kind of tough love, like, I'm doing this for your own good. You're not going to want to see your name on this picture unless we get it right.
I was on that picture for a year, and it took us about 6 months before one day we sat in dailies and we saw Superman fly for the first time. It brought tears to everybody's eyes because he's flying.
Gentlemen, this man needs help. Well, I certainly hope this little incident hasn't put you off flying, miss. Statistically speaking, of course, it's still the safest way to travel.
Right. Wait! Who are you?
A friend. Bye.
I had never met Marlon Brando, so I called Coppola, who had done The Godfather. And I said, "Francis, is there anything you can tell me?" He said he's a genius. He's delightful. He's phenomenal. He said, "You'll be awestruck the way he talks." He said, "If you really listen to when he talks, he always hangs himself. So just listen." I said, "Okay." And then we drove over and went up to Brando's house. Most gracious icon I've ever met in my life, and when we sat down, and for hours we talked. We talked about everything but Superman. And then finally he said, "Well, you're not here to hear all these stories. We're here to talk about my wardrobe, right?" He said, "I think I'd like to play it like a bagel." He said, "I've done my homework on this." I said, "Yeah." He said, "Well, how do you know what people look like up there? They could look like bagels." He said, "But because I'm sending my son to Earth to save him, I am going to make my son into the image of the humans and send him. but I can be a bagel. And it really made sense. You know, we're all starting to listen. Producers going, oh, yeah, good idea, Mr. Randall. I'm going, shut up. Tom's looking at me, we know what to do. And we listened, and it went on and on and on. And finally, he said, what do you think? I said, well, I tell you, Marlon. I said, a while back you told me a story about your little fable you were telling your child, and you said that the fox jumped over the log, went around the wall, and your son said no, went over the log and over the wall and around the log, and you said children know. He said, yeah, why? I said, well, Marlon, Jor-El, the father of Superman, has been around since 1936, and there isn't a child from 4 years of age to my age that doesn't know what Jor-El looks like. And he looks like you the way you are now. And he said, I really hung myself talking too much, didn't I? I said, you may have. He said, show me my costume. And I showed him, and that was it. And it was just delightful.
This is no fantasy. No careless product of wild imagination. No, my good friends. These indictments that I have brought you today, specific charges listed herein against the individuals, their acts of treason, their ultimate aim of sedition. These are matters of undeniable fact. I ask you now to pronounce judgment on those accused.
I was introduced to Gene Hackman, and then he had a mustache, and I was just starting to grow a mustache at the time. I had about a 3 weeks growth. And we talked for a little bit, and we talked about Lex Luthor and who he was and what. And I said, gee, Mr. Hackman, I said, you know, would you consider shaving your head so you don't have to wear one of those ball caps? He said, I'm not going to shave my head, and I'm not going to wear a ball cap. He said, they're terrible. They are. They're terribly uncomfortable. Water pours on you. I said, well, Lex Luthor was bald. He said, that's your problem. I said, oh, my God. I said, well, at least you'll take off the mustache. He said, no, I like my mustache. I said, but everybody knows Lex Luthor is bald, and he has no mustache. And he said, it's your problem. So I went back to England, and we were shooting on other pieces of the film, and I had a call. Gene Hackman had arrived, and he was up in makeup. I called up there, and I said, Stuart, this Dick, don't say anything. Just tell me, does he have his mustache? He said, yes. I said, oh, great. And I'd shaved mine off by then. I got bored with it. I said, Stuart, I said, I want you to leave there, and I want you to come down to my office. So I said, Stuart, he came down. I said, I want you to put a mustache on me, but I don't want to see any lace. I want to make it as perfect as you've ever done in your life. And I walked up to the makeup room where they were doing some tests on Gene, and he was in a chair. And I said, hi, Gene. He said, hi. I said, listen, I worked out the hair. He said, yeah, that's great. I said, you don't mind wearing the skull cap for the ball cap? He said, no, I'll wear that one day. I said, great. I said, but the mustache's got to come off. He said, no, the mustache stay. I said, listen, take off yours, I'll take off mine. And he looked at me and he said, oh, okay, but you're going to do it now. I said, yeah. I said, go ahead, Stuart, take his mustache off. And Stuart started to shake. I said, take his mustache off. And Stuart went and he used his electric razor, and he took it and he shaved him clean, and Gene said, okay, you next. I said, I can do it from here, and I went like this. And I peeled my mustache off. And he just stared at me, and I saw his neck go from here to here and started to throb, and I knew I was dead. And he looked, and it took about 30 seconds, and he broke out laughing.
Don't touch that.
I told you. It's kryptonite, Superman. A little souvenir from the old hometown. I've spared no expense to make you feel right at home. You were great in your day, Superman. But it just stands to reason. When it came time to cash in your chips, this old, diseased maniac would be your banker. Mind over muscle.
even care where the other missile's headed, do you?
Certainly I do. I know exactly where it's headed. Hackensack, New Jersey.
I think what makes Dick Donner a unique director are two things. His desire to enable his co-workers to do their best, and a real innocence about the story, so that he can look at it really from an audience's point of view and say, tell me the story.
But when a picture's finally over, you kind of divorce yourself from it. Because you can no longer, it's out of your control. And everything is gone. And that year of your life, hopefully, has been well spent. And it's been productive and fulfilling. But it's gone.